Welcome to The Thriving Marriage, the podcast for those who want to get their spouse back in love with them and truly thrive.
You'll learn why 95% of people don't save their marriage and the secret method no one else is talking about that will change everything for you. Are you ready? Let's turn tragedy to triumph.
Here are your hosts, international marriage experts, Mark Johnston and Heather Choate.
So welcome everyone to the High Thrive Coaching, the podcast. Mark Johnston here with Heather Choate. We are actually really excited because this is the first time that we are running the podcast where we're both together. We've had a little bit of some scheduling issues here with vacation and summer coming on, but we're here, we're together right now, and really excited about that. So today, I was actually really, even further excited about the topic because I know this is a big issue for a lot of people. So today, as an introduction, we're going to be talking about the 3 vital tools to open communication with your spouse. Even if they're completely closed off, even if communication is really difficult, these things work. So we're also going to be sharing with you a little known secret that's really changes a lot of things here when it comes to greater understanding in the marriage. But before that, one of the big things Heather and I really love to focus on is mindset, and having that positive mindset can make a huge impact in your relationship, in your life. So we always like to focus on situations that are going well. And Heather, I think you have a client win for this week that you've been dying to share.
Yes, I am. I'm very excited for this because it just goes along so well with communication and is a major win, illustrating how this method that we're going to teach you today helps to open up communication. So this comes from Jessica, and she just shared this with us in the group. It's so awesome. So she and her husband had the longest conversation that they've had in a long time, and communication is finally opening up, which is one of our biggest first milestones that we look for. And let me share it to you in her own words. All right, Jessica says, my husband called me at 12:30 last night. We talked for over 30 minutes. That's the longest convo we've had in a long time. He said he wants to see something concrete. I told him, this is me. This is real. He said, sorry, not sure why I called and woke you up. I do. God. Asking for prayers that God keeps working on us and our restoration. So congratulations to Jessica. This is just a huge win that he is actually seeking out conversation now and that you're able to open up and have that going on. Now, I am really intentional about the words that I use. And I titled this the 3 vital tools to open up communication. And if communication is a struggle for you right now, and I would say 99% of the time when couples come to us and their relationship is struggling, maybe there's an affair going on, maybe one wants a divorce, maybe they're talking about separation, or maybe things are just really cold and distant, or maybe they're really angry and volatile. The biggest thing to go out the window, like the first thing to go out the window, is always communication. And I know for me personally in my relationship, every time that Ben and I are struggling, it's almost always about communication. So it's a huge topic. It's an important topic. And I didn't want to just throw it around loosely, but to give some really concrete tools. In fact, I use the word vital for a reason, because like Mark said at the beginning with our little introduction there, these things work. Okay. And if you do nothing else, then do this. In fact, I would also encourage everyone to kind of throw out everything that you may have heard from friends or family or even your counselor or books, and come at this with a really clean slate. Come at this with an intention that you want to learn, an intention that you want to improve. And let's not just have this be information, but let it truly lead to transformation. So with that being said, that's exactly what Jessica's done here. And again, a huge high thrive is what we say. High thrive, Jessica, you did awesome. And I'm really glad that this conversation and this communication is opening up for you as you've applied this method. So let's break it down. Mark, can you give us a brief overview of what these 3 tools are, and then we're going to dive in deep.
Sure. So I had to think about this for a bit because, if we're only going to narrow this discussion down to 3 tools, because there's a lot of things you can do to open up communication. So after giving it some thought, I came down to these 3. It's empathy, understanding, and validation. I'm going to lump that all into one because I think it's very much mostly the same thing. We have positive feedback and appreciation, number 2, and knowing what you want. Now, I chose each of these because a lot of the people that are listening are dealing with some really serious marriage issues. And I found that there are certain things that can really change the environment, change the kind of the spirit of things when there's a lot of this tension going on, or even just a lot of the apathy going on. And I felt like these 3 were like the biggest, the things that would have the most impact here. And Heather and I, we don't like to hold back. We're not the kind of people that say, well, if you just subscribe to our whatever here over, if you just pay us some money, we'll give you the real secrets. No, we want to be really free with our information. So I wanted to give you the most impactful things here. And so I wanted to start off with these 3, and we'll go, like Heather said, we'll go into some depth here. But starting off with, I think, the most important one, the empathy, understanding, and validation. I want to ask you, Heather, what do you think? Like, have you seen a lot of this sort of thing, a lot of that empathy, understanding, a lot of that validation in your own marriage with Ben? Are there times when this has really had a big impact in your marriage?
Absolutely. So the times when we're really doing well or we're really healing is when we finally come to understanding one another. And the times that we struggle are the times when we are very self-centered. I'm just being completely honest, speaking from myself. We run into different things. I just even had an experience. I'll show this real quick as an illustration real quick. At church the other day, I have asked my husband that after church, we have 7 children, and that we don't linger and talk with friends and visit long amounts of time while the kids are sitting with me in the car, because it becomes a very challenging situation. And so he's respected that for several months now. And that's kind of like, we talk about that. That's like a healthy boundary or something I communicated I needed from him, and he's respected it. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he was out talking with a friend and talking. And I was starting to get more and more upset because I was like, wow, he's not respecting me. He's not listening to what I've asked him to do, and kind of put these walls up inside myself. Like, even got to the point where I felt myself starting to say, well, he must not care, right? And it wasn't until I decided to, well, listen to that story that's not making me happy, go back to our PATH method, which we're going to share here on the Thriving Marriage with you guys more and more about. And the first step is perspective. So I'm only seeing this from my very limited perspective. And I can check myself now and be like, okay, before you get all upset and get mad at him for like the rest of the day and turn it into this big blow up thing, which is what I would have done several years ago, I decided, okay, hold my perspective aside and then just try to understand where he's really coming from. So later, after we went home, the kids are all settled having lunch, I just pulled him aside and I said, I noticed that you were talking a really long time. What was going on? Like, why were you doing that? And he said that his friend there was having a really difficult time and that he had reached out to him asking for help. And so what I had judged in my limited knowledge was that he was disrespecting me and my boundary and my desire to get home quickly and not have the kids in the car fighting, was actually his desire to help a friend at a moment of need. And so then I was able to have empathy and put myself in his shoes and recognize that he wasn't trying to disrespect me or not keep that understanding that we had with each other, but that was a special circumstance. And so it softened my heart and allowed us to heal. So I know that's a kind of a simple or a surface level thing. However, if I chose not to have understanding and I chose just to stand my ground in what I thought was going on, this could have perpetuated and created a cycle of contention between he and I that could have lasted many days until it finally kind of blew up, and then we got over it. That's kind of the unhealthy patterns that we've been in when we didn't show understanding first. So that's a simple example. And I know that if things are really struggling in your marriage, you might be like, oh, Heather, that's such a small thing. Like, you don't even understand like what's really going on with us. However, in the multitude of people that come to us every single day asking for help, this is always where we want to start, because having understanding for each other creates that empathy. So real quick, before we just go a little bit into it, just ask yourself, how good does it feel when someone understands me? Like, we all crave understanding. It's one of the highest human emotions. And why is that? Well, it's because ultimately a lot of us, we feel really alone and we feel like no one gets us, and we want to have that feeling of being understood. So when you can give that to your partner, that builds a huge bridge between you.
I just want to say that, for me and my marriage with Jen, this has been one of the things that I'm really proud of in our marriage, because, and to be honest, we've really had to, we struggled with this for some time when we were first married. We've gone through some big struggles, and I know even for me and Jen, even right now, there's times when, it's sometimes hard to open up and be really vulnerable at times, but knowing that Jen is going to be there and very understanding to me, really helps me to be able to get there. I can remember earlier on earlier on in my marriage, going through some hard struggles, and Jen trying to talk about it with me, and I can even picture it in my mind, moments where we would both just sit there in silence for a little bit, because it was hard to say the next thing, because for me it felt like, okay, this is really hard, she's not going to understand my point of view. And I'm happy to say, at this point in our marriage, our ability to step into each other's shoes and to really see things from the other person's perspective has been such a transformative thing for us. Such a powerful thing it feels wonderful to have someone there that has that level of understanding for me. And it applies very much. You guys can say, okay, well, Mark or Heather, they're not going through struggles like this. They don't know how it is. But I can tell you, in those times that we struggled, this is what got us through. This is what got us past that point where we actually could start to open up, is when one person extended that branch out and offered that understanding. That's what helped Jen and I get past those points in our relationship. So this is, like Heather was saying, absolutely vital. I had this other thing, this other question. Heather and I are looking off this, and it's like, okay, what about some moments where we haven't felt understood? But I'm not even sure if, for me, whether whether we really need to go into that. I don't know about you, Heather, but I think just even focusing here on, just how important this point is. Now,
right. Well, that whole idea of have you ever not felt understood is like, well, are you human? Like, I'm sure we've all felt like we weren't understood, and it's so frustrating and it's so challenging, and that just creates further walls, right? When I think about communication, I think about, like, here I am on one end of a canyon, and there is my spouse on the other end, like across the cliff. Like, there's a huge canyon between us, and we're both standing on opposite cliffs. And somehow we have to create a bridge so that we can communicate, because we come from such different places. We have different backgrounds. We have different perspectives. We have different interpretations. I mean, Mark, have you ever thought that you and Jen were talking about the same thing, only to find out it meant something completely different to both of you?
We actually, I mean, these were smaller things, but yeah, even in recent weeks, I mean, that happens to Jen and I all the time. And I bet, okay, I actually do want to sit on this topic just for a moment, now that we are getting into it, because I bet a lot of people listening to this probably have felt that, that moment where they didn't feel understood. And I bet that it's been really, really difficult to take a moment, collect yourself, and say, you know what, maybe I need to offer that understanding to the other person. I think that's really the most difficult part here with this understanding tool, is even in those moments when you feel you're being a bit attacked, when things are feeling a little bit unfair, like turning that around and giving what's needed to your partner. I mean, would you agree with that, Heather?
Absolutely, right. It's hard because we do become defensive. And so what you need to do is try to take like a 30,000 foot view of the situation. And instead of feeling defensive or feeling hurt or feeling angry, ask yourself, what do I really want? What do I really want here? Which is going to our last point. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But it's, if I really want to have good communication, then am I willing to show them some understanding? Am I willing to try to see things from their perspective? And Mark, one of the things that I love that we've put together is the proven conversation starters. Like if communication is so closed off, or if it's so volatile, how do you open up that communication? And so for everyone that's in our email subscriber to our Thriving Marriage newsletter, we're going to send you those proven communication starters. And if you want to get in that newsletter, I'll drop the link here in a little bit. But those are some incredibly powerful ways to open up that communication and to build greater understanding. I'm reminded of my good friend that's been working with us here for a while. His wife has been wanting a divorce, and they have been going through this for about a year now. And he came to my husband and I a night a couple months ago and was saying, she tells me she needs these things, but I don't understand what she's talking about. And so, she would say things like, I need more affection. I want you to be like physically more affectionate with me. I want you to put your arm around me. I want me to, but he still didn't get it for whatever reason. Sometimes we still just don't get what they're saying or get what they mean. Maybe they're saying, I'm not in love with you anymore. Like I'm in love with someone else, or I never loved you, or I just need to find myself. And they say things like this that are very surface level, and we don't get what they really mean. In fact, we'll go further into that, about that being their story, right? That we need to uncover. But beyond that, it's like, well, what do you mean? That's our golden question. So when you're trying to build that understanding, there's opening questions that you can have to help open up that communication. And even beyond that, it has to come from a real genuine desire to understand.
That's the thing, right? Is a lot of, no one really learns about this in school.
Right.
I would say very few people actually take classes. Now, I don't know about you. I remember before Jen and I got married, we actually did take a marriage class, like a pre-marriage class, but I'll say I can't remember much from it. I don't think we actually went over a lot about communication. But so I'm saying it's understandable if you don't know where to start. So yeah, I like that you mentioned the conversation starters. I'm going to be a little bit biased here because I did put that together myself. I think it was pretty good.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. And so I just want to touch there on that mindset piece. That even with those questions, though, if you're coming at it from a desire for them just to understand you, or just to get them back, or just to get them to stop the divorce, they will sense that. They will sense that it's not really genuine, and that it's not from a place of really caring. So that's, again, why I encourage you to take like a 30,000 foot view, decide what you really, really want. And if it's true that I just really want to understand you. So, in that example with my friend, so Dana, when you say you want more affection, what does that mean? What does that look like for you? How would a person that shows you understanding, how would they act? What would the expression on their face be? How would it make you feel? Like just asking those questions. And then as he did that, she opened up and shared with him what it really looked like and what it meant, so that he could understand her and then start to meet those needs. So that's an example of creating that understanding from a genuine place of, I care about you, and regardless of what happens in our relationship, regardless of if I get you back or not, it has to come from genuine place of I just care about you and I want to be a better person. Please help me understand you. Does that make sense?
All right, should we move on to the next tool?
Absolutely, yeah. So the next one is positive feedback and appreciation. So what does that look like, Mark? How do we always hear, have a positive mindset, give positive feedback, right? But can you give us some examples and some further illustration of what that really looks like?
Yeah. Okay. The whole reason I put this tool here in the first place is because so often when there are some struggles going on, it's because people start looking for evidence that things are going wrong. They get into this, as Heather was saying, this mindset, okay, things are going wrong, and then they start looking for evidence. Here's this situation where, my husband, my wife, they rejected me. They didn't appreciate what I did here. And this is normal. It becomes easy if you've been married for a long time to not really even think about, appreciating all the little things that your partner does. But I can almost guarantee you that most relationships start off with a lot more of this positive feedback and appreciation in some way, shape, or form, even if it's not necessarily verbal. This is how relationships actually grow deeper, is you extend yourself out a little bit, you grow together a little bit, and then you're rewarded in some way. Maybe you just told something very deep to your partner when you're first meeting, and they say something along the lines of, they might say, I really appreciate you sharing with me. That means a lot. Or maybe you did something really nice, and you just see the look of joy on their face because of that kind thing that you did, that romantic thing that you did. And this absolutely helps open up communication, because if your partner and you are in this mode where you're kind of looking for that hurt, here's where you start shifting that. You make it a little bit safer to do something nicer. You make it a little bit safer to open up. You make it safer to be a little bit more vulnerable. And this should be especially done, if communication problems are what's getting in between you and your spouse. Giving that little bit of positive feedback or appreciation when they do communicate positively with you, it's just going to encourage that even more.
I really like this, Mark. So can you give us some examples of what would positive feedback look like? Maybe in some big moments and some small moments too.
Sure. So I'm thinking about, I'm trying to look back on my relationship with Jen, and this was a hard time. Like I said, we've gone through some struggles here and there. I remember we were struggling a bit financially, and I was still going to college, and I think we had just one child at the time. We have 5 now, but the place I was working at, I was just working. Anyways, the place was going under. They ended up closing shop, and I remember going to work thinking okay, we're going to meet these bills. I went into work and basically said, hey, everyone gather together. We're letting you all go because we're closing shop. They just let us know right there. Don't come into work the rest of the week. And I did not know how to go and tell that to Jen when we were struggling with finances. So I just kind of, honestly, I sat in my car for a bit. And finally, I went home and I let her know what happened. And she just sat there, and this is kind of a moment that I felt really brought us together. And she's like, thanks for. That must have been hard for you to come and tell me about this. And we just talked about it for a while. And then, on top of that, after, this is the kind of person that Jen is. She's like, okay, let's figure something out. Let's work together on this. There's that little bit of positive feedback. We went and talked about it, and then we got right into working on it. It felt okay to share these things. Now, obviously, she would have known eventually, and there's been other instances where, of course, between a husband and wife, we have to share some really personal things, some hard things. But Jen has always been there to accept that well and to work with me on that. And so each time I come to her with those things, there's always that positive feedback and appreciation, and vice versa. So even on little things, even on, or big things like this, this is what's really helped us with communication, because I know if I go to Jen with anything that, even if not immediately, in the long run, she's going to appreciate that I can talk with her more than if I were to try to deal with it on my own or try to hide things. But what about you, Heather? I mean, this is a huge part of just the relationship in general. Even if we leave communication out of it, this positive feedback and appreciation. I mean, can you think of anything between you and Ben this really had an impact on?
Yeah, so it makes me think of that saying that what gets praised gets repeated. If you think about, okay, we're going to play it simple for a minute. If you think about a dog, I'm not saying our spouse is a dog, but if you think about a dog or a small child, what you praise them and what you reward them for is what they continue to do. So in some ways, we're all like really big, small children, right? Inside. And we all crave being recognized and noticed for the good things that we're doing. In my relationship, there was a lot of negativity that went on for many, many years. The root of all of that honestly came from a lot of my own insecurities. And we'll go deeper into that another day. But bottom line was, I didn't feel like I was deserving of love on a deeper subconscious level. And so on kind of more of a surface level, it caused me to put up walls and to be mistrusting and to look at some of the negative things in him, because then I felt like if I kind of put up that wall, it would keep me safe somehow. It would keep me safer. And so that created a lot of distance between Ben and I, to the point where he did not feel comfortable opening up to me, and he didn't feel comfortable in those vulnerable moments. And so having to work through all of that over the years, even to this day, I'm still very conscious about thanking him when he shares something that might be a little bit more vulnerable. And this last couple years, communication has been deeper and better than ever before because of that. And sometimes it was some really hard things to swallow. Sometimes the things that he had to share were really painful. And he was always afraid that it was going to set me into a spiral and make things worse, right? And so he felt like it was better not to talk about things than to talk about them and make them worse, right? That's a really common pattern that we see as well. And so that was the pattern that I was in. And so whenever he would share a little bit about how he was feeling, I'd let him know, I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to be honest, it was hard for me to hear, but it's better because now we can move forward. And now I know what's been bugging you. Like sometimes he would just be bothered and I wouldn't know why. And it would be very frustrating. And so I had a really hard time opening up that communication because it felt like I was talking to a closed wall. And I know a lot of you can relate to that. And so it was by asking those opening questions, asking him what he really meant, and showing understanding and genuine compassion, kind of putting my own pride aside and really wanting to grow and work together. He could sense that, and that allowed him to open up and feel safer. And then I would thank him for that and thank him. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable. And then the next day or two, almost without fail, he would come back and say, Heather, thanks for listening. That wasn't easy for me to share that, but I'm really glad I did. And I'm really glad that we can work on these things now and that we can get better. And then it's been an upward spiral, like an upward trend instead of the negative downward spiral that we had been stuck in for years. So
I want to, right there, I think is another part of this that's, I think, really important because you and I both shared things, okay, like even if things are really hard, we should share that with our partner and then give this positive feedback. But I think an even better part of this tool is just, even about sharing those positive moments with each other. I mean, so often when things are going hard, I see, okay, the clients come in, they start talking with me and they're like, well, just there's nothing going on between us. And I do think that, like, once again, we get into like this kind of apathy sort of state, if you've been married for a long time and you're not really working on things. But, one of my favorite parts of the day is, at the end of the day, going and talking with Jen and just kind of talking about all the nice things that happen. And the response that she gives me is just, it feels great. This works the other direction too. And I think even more than sharing those really hard things and getting this positive feedback, just the consistent being able to share something positive with your partner and being able to, share in that positivity together is also just a huge part of this, and what brings people together and what makes it easier to have more of those positive moments even further.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a really good question here. We are, this podcast will be on iTunes and everything like that. Super professional. But we are doing this live right now as well in our group. And I can't ignore our incredible members here in the Thriving Marriage Facebook group. And we got a really good question that I feel like has to be addressed. So if you've been badly hurt, how can you be understanding?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
It is so good. We have to talk about it.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If you're going to deepen the relationship, right? Okay. If you've been hurt, I'm looking at this almost like a spectrum. You really shrink that level of trust. You start trying to protect yourself. And if you're going to deepen that relationship, if you're going to deepen your ability to have these conversations, someone needs to be able to be vulnerable. Now, if you've been hurt, I understand. You're not going to want to do this. So you still have to. What you can do, though, to make this a little bit easier is, set some parameters. Be very clear with your intentions. So what I would do is approach the relationship, say, hey, look, I want to make sure that we can share this with each other, that we can be a little bit more open with each other. And because I think that's a bit of the problem here. So you're putting out your intention there. I also think then if you set some parameters on how you can share things with each other and be safe, that's how you're going to be able to take some smaller steps forward. So if you say, I want us to be able to communicate better with each other. I want us to be able to share these things with each other. I think this is what's been getting in the way. And I really need you to listen, and I really need you to be understanding. So can we agree to some things here, like this and this and this? I think that's probably the best course of action. If you're asking that question, then it's completely in your control to be able to go there, set those boundaries, and be vulnerable yourself. And I think that's going to be the best way to start healing that hurt.
Absolutely. Which goes really well into our third tool here, which is knowing what you want. At the end of the day, at the end of my life, at the end of it all, what do I really, really want? And this is where it really comes home for me. I'm going to be super honest and vulnerable as always. I always give it to you real straight right from the heart. But there was a moment in my life where I realized I might not live another year. Those who have been following me for a while know that I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 29. And I realized that I was not the person I was meant to be. And that the way I'd been living my life, while it looked good on the outside, there was so much pain and there was so much bitterness in my own heart that it was really robbing me of happiness. And I was focused on so many things that didn't really matter. And so that experience was such a wake-up moment for me of realizing, wow, life is so short and I need to make the most of it. I need to become this person, because if I don't, then what was the point, right? I need to know that I am becoming the best version of myself and that I am working on these things. It's not about being perfect, but it's about progress. And I need to focus on the most important things. And so coming into your challenges and having your intention clear is going to be vital. I'm going to use that word again. It is going to be life-saving for you and your relationship, because when you are clear on what matters most and you're clear on what you want, despite what anyone else tells you is or is not possible, then you have that direction, and that direction is power. And it gives you that sense of empowerment inside of yourself. And so, Mark, can you share with us, how do you apply this idea of knowing what you want, of having an intention in your marriage, and how do we teach that, and how do we use that to help others who are struggling, to help them truly thrive?
So this right here, I mean, could be applied into so many things, but in terms of communication, you know, I'll notice that, you know, Jen or I, well, you know, for me, if I get upset with my wife, I'll have to catch myself sometimes, and I'll have to say to myself, okay, is this, you know, in the moment, is this actually the direction I want to be going? Do I want to be angry? And Jen and I have gotten really good at calling each other out on things like this, and so sometimes Jen has to remind me of the same thing. She'll say, okay, is this where you really want to? Is this where we really want to go? And not in like a confrontational sort of way. Just kind of a reminder, like, okay, do we actually want to be fighting, or do we want to actually get past this and be close and do all these other things? And so I use this sort of tool every day. You know, if I ask myself, okay, is this actually where I want to go with this conversation? Is this where I want to go with this interaction? And when I actually think about it for a moment, you know, and aim myself to where I want to go, you know, 99% of the time I can get there. Even if say Jen is upset with me and she's not responding well, because that does happen on occasion, I can say to myself, okay, where do I want to go with this? And I know that for me, I always want to make sure that I'm calm and respectful towards Jen, that I'm that I'm being understanding towards her, and so I work in that direction. And that really helps me get past, you know, once again, if Jen is not right there in the moment, you know, herself, it helps me to kind of get past that and not get upset and not get angry, because I know exactly where I want to go with all of this. And I'm sure you, Heather, you'd probably do the same sort of thing with Ben at times. I know you guys work really well together. Can you think, what about like on a broader perspective? So I kind of shared here, like very specific. I mean, can you think of what? You already shared that story, I guess.
Well, it's really about the law of focus. This is actually one of those kind of universal, eternal laws. And it's the law of focus. And the law goes that what you focus on grows. And there's another way of saying it, where you focus your attention tends to be where you end up. In professional racing, I guess they train the professional race cars at I was about to say NASA. Oh my goodness, that would have been so dumb. That's because we just watched the NASA show last night, NASCAR. There, I'm showing my ignorance anyway. But they train them to focus on where they want to go, and they train them not to look at the wall, because when they look at the wall, they hit the wall. And some of them get so scared about hitting the wall that instinctively they keep checking, like glancing over at the wall. Am I going to hit it? Am I getting close? Am I veering too close to the wall? And what happens is they end up hitting it. And so you can't look at what you don't want. You know, if you want to look for the bad, you're going to find it. And that's where you're going to end up. If you want to look for the good things, if you want to look at the healthy, happy relationship, close, intimate that you want, and you focus on that, that's where you will end up. Now, there's a law of gestation. That means it's going to take time. It doesn't happen, probably as race car fast, speedy as we would like, but it does happen. It is a universal law, kind of like the law of gravity, one you can't really see, but we can feel the effects and we can see them in the end. So
my favorite example of this is, my absolute favorite example is this speech or time. I don't know under what circumstances it was originally given, but it was this guy named Earl Nightingale.
Love Earl Nightingale.
Yeah,
the man.
if any of you haven't listened to this, I would recommend you go and listen to this immediately. So you just type into YouTube Earl Nightingale, and it's called The Strangest Secret. It's maybe like 30, 40 minutes. I'm sure you've listened to it, Heather.
Yep.
But his explanation for this thing is he kind of gives this and I always get these mixed up, analogy, metaphor about a ship. But he says, okay, let's pretend that you have this ship and you set sail, but you don't have anyone, you don't have a captain. You just say, hey, let's just set sail. You don't have anyone deciding where you're going to go. Well, you're not going to really get to where you want to go if you actually don't set a course, if you don't have someone steering the ship, if you don't actually choose where you want to go. And I might be butchering like the little story there, but you get what I'm saying is you're much more likely to get where you want to go if you decide where you want to go, rather than if you just let it be and just let things happen. And this is applicable in life. It's applicable in your relationship. It's applicable right there in the moment.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're fine.
One of the biggest kind of mistakes that we see happen is that a lot of couples will assume what their partner wants. I think I know what Ben wants, right? Or assume that their partner, like, I think Ben knows what I want. He must know that, certainly, right? He has to just read my mind and get it. If he knew me at all, he would know that this is the way I want it, right? And I've done that. I've been there. And this is where a lot of couples go as well. And then what happens is that they become disappointed when it doesn't happen, but the real cause of it wasn't communicated clearly. So oftentimes we're guessing and thinking, assuming that they know. And so what we need to do is get really clear on those things and applying this lot focus on things like physical intimacy, communication, child rearing, all of those different things, so that we aren't just wishful thinking or just assuming that they're going to know exactly what we want. And then when they don't do it, then we're disappointed. That's a big trap that we definitely don't want to fall into.
I think the other part of this is not just knowing what you want, but communicating that,
right.
Or communicating your intentions here, because that, especially when things are running really hot, when they're running really tense, like you were just saying there, a lot of people assume that they know exactly what the other person is intending, what they're wanting, when it's completely mistaken. And when it's running tense or really negative, those assumptions are going to tend to be a little bit more negative. And so communicating these things can really open up communication quite a bit.
Absolutely. So that is it for today, my friends. I hope that you can go back and really listen and really sink into your biggest takeaway. What was an aha moment that you had? What was it? Something that maybe I'm going to call it your intuition, your gut, maybe your inner being, whatever you want to call it, your core. What was something that resonated with you? And you said, you know what? Yeah, I've been really focused on myself. Maybe it's time that I show some more understanding for my spouse. Maybe if I put myself in their perspective, then it will help me to see things in their way, why they're doing this, and it will give me empathy. And when I have that feeling of compassion and empathy, then I'll have a desire to work together with them on this rather than against them. It'll help me to build that bridge of communication, right? And maybe it's more, I need to know what I want. Maybe I'm getting so caught up in my own fear, my own pain, my own hurt, my own anger, that I've lost what I really want. And maybe it's time that I get some clarity on that. So I just encourage you here to really sink into what your biggest takeaways were and make sure that it's not just information in one ear, out the other ear. That is not what Mark and I are about here as international marriage experts. We are about making true change and true progress in your marriage and in your life, because like I said, life is too short to live it any other way. So now it's time for our marriage mythbuster, all right? And our marriage mythbuster is that if they don't understand me, they will never understand me. Or they are so different from me, I will never understand them. So this is one of those mindset traps that we can get caught up in that's going to be like a major dam in the middle of our canyon, totally preventing us from building that bridge of having that understanding. So Mark, is that true? Is it true that they will never understand me? They've never understood me. They will never understand me.
Well, I mean, this wouldn't be the marriage mythbuster if it were true. Now, would it? No. Here's the thing: is yeah, I think people get stuck into patterns. I think people get used to the way things are, and they might say, well, it hasn't been, I haven't had this understanding for a long time, so therefore I will never get this understanding. And I talk to people all the time. They're saying, well, no, they're not gonna talk to me about this. They're not gonna understand what I'm saying here. And really what they're saying is, this is what I'm used to. And I would contend that it's not that it's not impossible. It's just most of the time there's something in the way. So whether that is some amount of pain that's preventing someone from taking a moment to understand their partner, whether that's that your partner hasn't themselves felt understood. There's oftentimes this is kind of like, these are like the surface level issues, is this communication that lets us get a little bit deeper. These are actually what I feel like are typically the easier things to solve. And there's almost always something to be done to help another person understand you. Even if if they're going to sit there and stonewall you, even if they're going to cover their ears and, they're going to refuse to listen to you, there's always something to be done in these cases to help you feel better understood. And of course, it's going to be different in every situation, what needs to be done, whether you need to set some boundaries, whether you need to take some action, whether you need to offer some understanding, whether you need to do something to break something. I feel like there's always something to be done here. Very, very, very few cases can nothing be done. And that's typically only when things have gotten so painful, so difficult that, the only times where I think nothing can be done is when there's been legal action taken, like there's been restraining orders and things like that. That's a really difficult situation to crack. But other than that, I feel like communication can be repaired in many cases.
100%. So if you are struggling with this and you want to be able to gain better communication in your marriage and apply these 3 vital tools, learn how to really open up real communication with your spouse, maybe even processing through some of those difficult emotions so that you can show greater understanding and that you can eventually receive understanding from your spouse as well, then I encourage you to go over to highthrivecoaching.com/apply. And you can book a it's completely free breakthrough call with us, where we will talk with you about the very best steps to take going forward and show you what that looks like on the other end, on the other side, going through our proven path method that's helped so many thousands of couples that have gone through our program and gone through this method to save their marriage. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't yet already. We have 4 open spots right now. This is going out to over 150,000 people this week as our podcast and our audience is growing. It's fabulous. We are here to create a movement. We're here to create breakthroughs in our culture and in our world. There is a lot of untruths about marriage and relationship, and we are here to turn the tide and show everyone exactly how to have a thriving marriage. So next week, we are going to share with you our trust restoration recipe, plus some really special news that you don't want to miss. So thank you, Mark, and thank you all. We will see you next time.
See you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.